There's a roster spot battle brewing between two particular players in this Mets organization vying for a bench spot come opening day. And Mets Nation, it's getting interesting. Let's talk about it. All right, Mets fans, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy CP. We are discussing the latest from New York Mets spring training down in Port St. Lucie. Hopefully, you all have been able to follow the spring training action over the past couple of days, tuning into all the post games that are going on the channel. If you missed those, I'll link them down in the description down below. But in this video, we are talking about the last bench spot between two particular players that have already been on the New York Mets before at the major league level and are fighting to become mainstays on this roster in 2025 and beyond. Before we fully get into this video, please do smash those thumbs up buttons right here on this video as you watch in the bottom right hand corner. If you are new to the channel, if you just stumbled upon the True Mets Talk podcast, make sure to subscribe for all your 2025 New York Mets content and live stream needs over here on YouTube, and comment your thoughts and opinions down below. I'm very curious, Mets fans, where you all stand on this topic. It is the last bench spot battle between the likes of Luisangel Acuna and Brett Baty. And this is something that I'm going to be watching out for, and everybody that roots for this team should be watching out for right here in spring training. Brett Baty is off to a tremendous start to his spring training. 5 for his first 8, a couple of extra base hits, one of which is a home run. He's been putting the bat on the ball. Yes, there has been some weak contact. One of his singles was a bloop hit right in front of the left fielder. He's got a couple of infield hits as well, so he's not necessarily scorching the baseball every single time that he's up, but he doesn't have any strikeouts either. His timing seems pretty on par, honestly, and I like everything that I'm seeing out of Brett Baty. And we continue to have these conversations about what positional value is Brett Baty going to provide the New York Mets if they do go down the route of giving him that last bench spot. Now, there was an interesting discussion that popped up with one of the viewers on my post-game streams actually yesterday after the New York Mets took on the Houston Astros and lost that game 8-5, stating that Brett Baty has the potential to play second base right now at the major league level if something happens to Jeff McNeil via injury or via a lack of production in the first couple of months of the season. This is why the New York Mets are trying to get him as acclimated as possible to second base. Now, I don't think that Brett Baty's competing for the starting job at second base. I think that defensively, that would be a little bit foolish. And making that transition from third base to second base can be a little bit tough. I know down the stretch of the 2024 AAA season, Brett Baty was slowly getting more acclimated to in-game action at second base. We've been seeing a bunch of video clips of him turning double plays. The footwork looks pretty good over there up the middle, but I question his range again up the middle of Francisco Lindor if the Mets were to rely on him, whether it's an emergency situation or whether they try to experiment with Baty starting at second base come the regular season. The defensive worries for me about Brett Baty are pretty minuscule compared to the worries that I have with his bat and how that's going to translate to the major league diamond when it really hasn't ever since he came up with this team back in 2022. Now, on the flip side, Brett Baty's scorching hot start to spring training. You see Luisangel Acuna here, 1 for his first 6 with an RBI and 2 strikeouts. I mentioned this in the postgame yesterday. It's very early. It's too early to be making these judgments, but I do think that the way this roster is shaping up, and I'll give you a little bit of an updated look at the potential opening day roster here in just a second, given some of the injuries that the New York Mets have sustained early into spring training. The way that this roster is shaking out, I do think that it's going to be between these two ball players vying for that last bench spot. Who do the Mets think that they can get more of an immediate production at the major league diamond, and who would they be a little bit more willing to put on the bench without getting everyday reps, right? Because we talk about Luisangel Acuna and his electricity. when he came up to the major leagues last season to relieve Francisco Lindor after he went on the IL with the back injury and he just took off. But with him being only 22 years old still, Luisangel Acuna, there is a valid reason to want to get him the most reps possible, whether he starts off his 2025 campaign down in Syracuse or up with the major league squad. Wherever he is, there is a real argument to be had that he should be getting everyday reps and trying to hone in on his craft, both offensively and defensively. Now, again, he is a super utility player. If he absolutely has to, I feel like he can make that transition over to the third base. I think his arm is strong enough, but we all know he's best suited up the middle, whether it's at shortstop, which he's clearly not going to play with Francisco Lindor there, or second base, depending on what happens with Jeff McNeil. Now, Luisangel Acuna definitely provides you a lot of good tools that you can utilize in the starting lineup. And we actually saw that when he had his first at bat in yesterday's ball game against the Houston Astros, getting on base with a little bit of a bloop hit. Not really a bloop hit. It was a line drive right over the shortstop's head. I should correct myself there. Getting on base in the first inning, swiping second base via the steal, something that we've seen him do time and time again in his minor league seasons up in his entirety of his career. And then he goes and advances on a throwing error from the catcher to third base. Jesse Winker, drives him in with a base hit. That's how you manufacture a run, whether you're a leadoff hitter or whether you're a 9-hole hitter trying to get on base, flipping the lineup over and getting in scoring position for the top of the lineup in Lindor, Soto, Alonso, etc. Luisangel Acuna has had a lot of props being given to him from Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns, basically stating that he will be making a very big contribution to the New York Mets at some point in 2025. We just don't know if that's going to come right off the bat, come opening day, whether he's going to be on the roster or whether they're looking to call him up around mid-season to make that contribution, depending on what happens with the likes of Brett Baty or Jeff McNeil. Now, there's, again, a lot of positional log jams here, talking about the outfielder Starling Marte, with him still being on this roster, Jeff McNeil being the veteran, probably the most likely to win that second base job, regardless of whatever happens in spring training with his bat. Jeff McNeil really hasn't gotten off to a hot start that I envisioned for him in spring training either. But again, it's only February 26th, so we're not going to be jumping to any erroneous conclusions here, especially with these hitters who are effectively much more behind the pitchers, as is natural so early on into spring training. But I wanted to put this up because a couple of weeks ago, I made my opening day roster projections before some of the injuries that the New York Mets actually sustained in spring training. And I figured I'd go back and update this graphic to reflect the injuries, the guys who will be starting the season on the IL, and Frankie Montas and Sean Manaea, and also highlighting down in red underneath the lineup column the positional battle that I am talking about right here in this video, which is why I'm making this video in the first place. If you want to take a look over at the rotation and how big of a hit the rotation has taken so far early into spring training, Clay Holmes is bumping up as your number 3 starter come opening day. If all else remains the same and the Mets continue to stress these internal options, even given the Montas and Manaea injuries. And thereafter, your rotation is going to be rounding out with Paul Blackburn as your number 4, Tyler McGill as your number 5, and Griffin Canning as your number 6. Now, I know that we're not here to talk about pitching in the rotation. I can talk about that in a separate video. But with these internal options, if that's the route that David Stearns is still going to take, if he's not going to trade for a guy like Eric Fetty, if he's not going to go ahead and get a guy like Spencer Turnbull on the free agent market or Jose Quintana, at this point, given the rotation in the bullpen, I'd make one easy switch and put Griffin Canning in the bullpen and Jose Butto in the rotation. That's a 1-for-1 swap, and I think that both of those positions, for the time being, it's not a long-term solution. It's kind of a Band-Aid effect for the first couple of months of the season until your starting rotation arms and Montas and Manaea come back. I would switch Griffin Canning and Jose Butto. But again, you came to this video to talk about the lineup and the bench spot battle that we are witnessing here in spring training, not the rotation. Maybe I will make an updated video talking about the rotation as a standalone video on the True Mets Talk podcast. But bench right now is looking like Starling Marte, who's going to be platooning with Jesse Winker, and also Tyrone Taylor, platooning effectively with Jose Siri in that center field slot. Luis Torrens is your backup catcher. And then the number 4 spot here, rounding out the bench, is going to be coming down between Luisangel Acuna and Brett Baty. Now, that's not to say that the Mets still can't rely on a veteran that we are seeing in spring training to take up that last bench spot, and starting both Brett Baty and Luisangel Acuna in AAA, because that's still an option. The primary name that comes to mind is Jared Young, who actually went 2 for 2 yesterday against the Astros and is coming off of an impressive campaign in the KBO when he spent half a season there in 2024, and now trying to make his stamp and his comeback onto a major league roster. But, at this point and at this juncture, given the gravity, especially in this situation of Brett Baty, right? And we talk about his age. He's 24, going on 25 years old. He's graduated from this prospect status into he needs to show that he's an everyday major leaguer or a serviceable bat at the very minimum for the New York Mets if they're not going to trade him. And this is his last opportunity to do so, given his age. Whereas Luisangel Acuna is still 22 years old, the Mets can afford to wait a little bit more given the positional logjam of Jeff McNeil. So it's a little bit more of a dire situation for Brett Baty, which helps him in terms of this conversation of making the roster and winning this battle. But also his spring training numbers thus far do help him out as well in that category, as well as him taking reps at second base. Both players only have 2 games under their belts, but I am watching this very situation unfold for the next approximately month or so, Mets fans. And I think that you all should do the same. It's going to be very interesting. Let me know down in the comments section if it came down to these 2 players. Who do you think is going to win this roster spot versus who do you want to win this roster spot? Let me know down in the comments section down below. Check out all the latest streams and videos in the description. I will link those in the description. And as always, smash those thumbs up buttons and subscribe to the channel. It's your boy CP. This has been the True Mets Talk podcast. Until next video or stream, I'm out. Peace.